Good morning, everybody. All right, let's do this. So this was, what was this? Homework number 4 or 5 or one of your homeworks for dividing the polynomials, right? So what we'll do is we'll take a look at it together, and this video will really help you understand how to divide these polynomials. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to do the math over here, and we're going to do the writing over here, and you'll see what that means. All right, so here we're going to take n squared plus 5n minus 50 divided by n minus 5. So I have n squared plus 5n minus 50 all divided by n minus 5. Okay, now the first thing, that voice in your head, right? The first thing you're going to tell yourself is how many times does this n, go into n squared? To this n squared, okay? And what on earth do you mean, Mr. G? Well, if I say, for example, imagine I say how many times does, oh, that should be an S here. How many times does, let's say, 5 go into 20, right? Imagine if I say that. I say, how many times does 5 go into 20? And you say, okay, Mr. G, it's 4. And if you say, Mr. G, it's because it's 5 times 4 equals 20, that's not 100% correct. Yes, that's correct, but the way you want to think about it is through division. How many times does 5 go into 20? The way you do this is 20 divided by 5 is 4, right? How many times does 5 go into 20? It's 4. So here, if I say how many times does n go into n squared, you say how many times does n go into n squared? You have to do n squared divided by n. And n squared divided by n is n. And if you're thinking, Mr. G, why is that the case? I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's look at this example for a second. If I have x to the 3 times x to the 4, right? What do you do with the 3 and the 4? This becomes x to the 7, right? But if I have x to the 7 divided by x to the 3, right? If I have this divided by this, then it has to be this. It has to be x to the 4. So what are you doing here? You're doing x to the 7 minus 3. You're doing 7 minus 3 to get to the 4, so you get x to the 4. So let's look at this example here. If I have n squared over n, right? If I have n squared over n, secretly there is a 1 here, right? So I'm really doing n, you remember you subtract, so it's n to the 2 minus 1. And then this becomes 2 minus 1, that's 1. But remember, n to the 1 is the same as n, right? Because it's just the invisible 1. So it's just n. And that's what we had here, right? You had n squared divided by n is n, okay? So how many times does n go into n squared? It goes in n times, right? It goes in n times. This n here goes right here. And now here, for step 2, I call this, this is the symbol I use. It's a, I don't know, maybe it'll be crazy, a boomerang. Now watch the rhythm. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. You're going to do n times n, which is what? This is n squared, right? N times n is n squared. Then boomerang again. 1, 2, 3. 1. Now n times negative 5 is what? Negative 5n, right? You're doing n times this is n squared, n times minus 5 is minus 5n. Okay? Step 3. You do here, parentheses, subtract. Okay? So watch. Parentheses, subtract. Okay? And now here, what do we do? Watch this. We're doing n squared minus n squared. N squared minus n squared. That is 0. Right? Now what do we do here? Look, we take 5n minus a negative 5n. So this becomes 5n plus 5n, which is 10n. And we put it over here. Okay? And then here, oh, maybe I should have wrote that as a step 4. Now subtract, right? That's what you did. You did this minus this. And what's step 5? Here, bring down everything else. Everything else. Right? So here, we're going to bring down this minus 50. And this is what now? This is minus 50. Okay? And now here, once we have all this, you're going to 6 is just rinse, repeat. Rinse, repeat. You're going to say the same rhythm again. You're going to say, how many times does n? How many times does this n? Not go into n squared now. It's how many times does this n go into 10n? Okay? So let's write that. Here, 7. How many times does n, this n, go into the 10n? How many times does n go into 10n? Question mark, right? And what's the algebra? What is the algebra you're doing? When I say how many times does n go into n squared, I do n squared divided by n, right? Here, what am I doing? I'm doing 10n divided by n. And what is 10n divided by n? This cancels. This is just 10. If you say, Mr. G, why is n divided by n? What is this? Well, remember here, this is a 1 and this is a 1. And this is n to the 1 minus 1. So this is equal to n to the 0. But here, in math, any number except 0, any number to the 0 is always 1. Anything. Anything. If I have 7 to the 1, it's 0. 3 to the 1, it's, I'm sorry. 7 to the 0, it's 1. 3 to the 0, it's 1. 1,375,232 to the 0, it's 1. Okay? And that's what you did here. That's why it cancels. So you just have 10. Now what do we do with that 10? We put it up here. So this is plus 10. Okay? Remember, rinse, repeat. We're following the same steps. After you do this move, what's the next move? 2. Boomerang. 1, 2, 3. Right? So what are we going to do? 10 times n will be what? 10 times n is 10n. 10 times minus 5 is minus 50. Okay? So here, what was our step 8? Step 8 was boomerang. Step 9, what do we do? After boomerang, parentheses, parentheses, subtract. Right? So you could write that. Parentheses, parentheses, subtract. Again, look. Parentheses, parentheses, subtract. And then what? You subtract this. You do 10n minus 10n. That's 0. So this is 0. Minus 50 minus a negative 50 becomes minus 50 plus 50, which is 0. So you just have 0. Right? You just have 0. And now here, can we bring anything else down? No. And this is what we have. When I divide this polynomial times this polynomial, I get that polynomial. Okay? So let's see. For example, let's say if I have our famous example, 288 divided by 16. That was 18, right? We did that before. Now here, what does this mean? It means, okay, you know what? Never mind. It's a bad example. Here, how can we check our answer? Right? Remember, if I had 20 divided by 5, it was 4. How can you check to see if this is right? You do 5 times 4, and it better equal 20, and it does. 20 equals 20. How can you check your answer? So for check, you have to multiply n minus 5 times n plus 10. You have to FOIL this, right? Gotta FOIL this guy. It better equal what? n squared plus 5n minus 50. Okay? Check it. Check it for yourself. All right? Let's do another problem together. Okay? Let's do another one together. One more, and that's it. Let's see. Let me get a good question for you. So you see, when we went back to the homework, where was that paper? We did question 1. Okay? Which is a good question. How about... Okay, you know what? Go. You can do it by yourself. All right? If you have questions, I'll be there to help you in class.